guys, and welcome to the fish room. I'm Rachel O'Leary and it's time for a Tuesday tip. And as promised, I'm going to show you guys how I incubate the apple snail eggs. Now, it's really very simple and very inexpensive, but I've been doing it this way for about 15 years and it works. Again, as I mentioned in my species spotlight, there's absolutely nothing wrong with leaving the clutches where they lie, as long as you've got high humidity, which means a close-fitting lid in the area that the clutch is laid. But what I find most often is that there's not enough humidity and the outer shells of the clutches, which can house 200 to 600 baby snails, get so hard that they're unable to emerge from the clutch and they end up dying inside of it. So what I prefer to do is to allow the clutch to harden, usually for a day or two, on the glass, and then I carefully pop it off. And it sounds scarier than it is. You don't need a razor blade, you don't need any sort of special tools. You just grab it and wiggle it a little bit and it usually pops off in one piece. So let's give that a try. Now this clutch is probably from a young snail. It's not very big. But I literally just reach in and pop it off. Now you can see this one's not very large. They can be up to twice this size in width, which isn't a bad thing. It's probably just from a young snail. So let's get started setting up an incubator. Now I said this is cheap and easy, and I meant it. I gathered together just two supplies. One is a plastic container. I prefer to use the disposable ones. They're very inexpensive. The ones that you buy lunch meat in work great. The size is not important. This one's actually a bit larger than what I normally use, but it's what I had on hand. This is just a disposable Ziploc container. You need that and some paper towels and a little bit of water. All I do is take a single paper towel, fold it into quarters, make it wet, squeeze out all the excess, and place it in the bottom of my tray. On top of that, I take 2 to 3 dry paper towels and place them on top of the moist ones. And what this does is it allows there to be high humidity in this container without saturating the clutch and turning it to mush. If these guys go into water before they're ready, they will drown. So they have to be emerged from the clutch before they go into the tank. Now I just simply place the clutch on top of that and grab a lid. Now for the lid, similar to like worm cultures, I just take a small screwdriver and poke holes all around, and this just allows some of the humidity to escape so that the clutch doesn't become wet. Now each day that the clutch is in my little incubator, I open up the lid and wipe off any condensation that's collected. And if that topmost paper towel is really damp, I'll replace it with a dry one. Now, clutches can hatch anywhere from about 8 days all the way up to about 3 weeks. If by about day 8 the color of the clutch isn't changing, they get like a moldy appearance. They get a moldy appearance when they're about to hatch, which is the baby snails chewing their way out, so the actual coating on the eggs gets thinner, so it looks like a gray-blue color. I'll show you guys that in an update if this ends up being a viable clutch. Then you know they're ready to hatch, and at that time what I do is I get a floating breeder trap, and I'll either open the clutch into it or I'll put a small piece of styrofoam floating in that with the clutch on top, so that when the baby snails are ready to hatch, they can emerge into the aquarium that they're going to be grown out in. And on that note, it's important in my mind, it's important with mystery snails that you hatch them into the tank they're going to be living in, because every time you move their parameters, if you change tanks or if you change temperature of the tank, they get a growth ring. And while it doesn't cause any problems for them, it makes their shells not as beautiful. And in fact, in my species spotlight, the blue snail that I showed you guys, this one, you can see the size he was when I got him. This was his shell before I got him. This is his shell since. And you can see there's that big line across it, and that is the change in parameters. You can see how much nicer his shell growth is now that he's been in the same tank. So, one of the biggest obstacles with raising these snails is that the babies, as I mentioned, there can be 200 to 600, are about the size of a pinhead when they hatch out of this clutch. So you can imagine vacuuming a tank can be very challenging, and that again is where hatching them into the floating breeder box within the aquarium you're going to raise them in is really helpful. Not only can they get to food easier because it's a smaller environment, you can also see within a few days what colors you're going to get. The ones that are striped will have little speckles, and the solids will look their actual color pretty quickly after hatching. I find that useful because, let's be real, not everyone wants 600 apple snails. You don't necessarily want to save every single snail from every single clutch, especially if you're doing some sort of work with line breeding. So you can select at that point easily the ones that you want to keep and grow out, or ones that you want to give away or call. So again, I just put this lid on, and then I float it in the tank where I'm going to grow them out. And I'll check this clutch daily, and when I see changes, I'll take some footage of it for you guys. And when they're ready to hatch, assuming this is a viable clutch, I'll show you that as well, and we'll go through the whole process of growing them out together. I hope that helps. It's really very simple, but I find it to be the most reliable method for rearing apple snail eggs. As always, thanks for your guys' continued support. Make sure you stop by all my social medias, hit the notification bell, and stop by my website, MsJinx.com. Coming up, I will be in Denver, Colorado for the Aquatic Gardeners Association convention. I hope to see a lot of you there. I'll put a link to that below as well. Let me know below if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions.